Yeah, I think it's a really cool. I mean, it has to be the future, right? I mean, it just it has to be cheaper. I mean, I'm biased, but I mean, it has to be cheaper to do microbes rather than do a whole organism. I mean, it's just there's no way that it's not. Like just
Maybe. I don't know, man. It's like it's really easy to just feed a cow some grains. That's that's pretty fucking cheap.
yeah.
Um,
I see that. I just yeah. I guess
I
you're
think it's going to be more. I think it's going to become more out of like necessity of like. I mean, didn't like this like what was it last month? Didn't like tens of thousands of cows just die in Kansas
They
or
did, dude. I
Oklahoma
saw those
from a heat
pictures. It
wave?
was nuts. They were
Right.
like, yeah, it was
It's
went
going
all
to
to
be
dog food.
the thing that's going to drive this industry is climate change
Yeah.
because it's either going to be like we're going to start losing crops because of droughts and heat wave. It's all going to be drought and heat, right?
Hmm.
We're going to lose crops. We're going to lose livestock. Maybe there's going to be more disease. I think just the hot and dry aspect that we're seeing more and more, it's gonna cripple our food system, and it might not be this decade, but it's like not looking good right now from my perspective. And I think that's what's really really awesome about fermentation is you control the temperature, right?
Yeah.
You control everything. So if
Whole
you can
environment.
control everything, you control the whole environment, man. There's no climate change that happens inside of a fermentation tank, right? Like there's no anthropogenic like effect, right? It's just like, you know, it does what you build it to do and you get to
And the
control it.
space.
And
I love the space
you
saving
know,
of it. You don't have to worry about
the space saving is it's huge. And you can do it anywhere. You don't need like fertile soil, you don't need good
hmm
weather. Like
runoff is
in
not a
our other
thing.
conversation
What is it? I
in
mean,
our other
look at
conversation,
the mono, like growing one crop at a time and stuff, like how bad that
right,
is for the environment, for just for
sure.
migrating birds, all that kind of stuff. The impact of monocultures, and here it's like maybe that's a good thing. So because I don't see. I mean, I've seen heterotrophic growth ideas for algae ponds outside, but not for here. It seems. I guess theoretically it could be possible to have better rates of growth and stuff based off of it, but it wouldn't be off the table. But it's just you can control it, exactly what we were talking about. You can control the entire ecosystem here. But the funny
Mhm.
thing here is like, how do you know? Like, okay, so you're looking at a chicken cell. They want to make chickens here. Okay,
Right.
what part of the chicken are you picking and to be your cell that you're going to grow?
It's a great question. Do you start with a stem cell or do they go right for the breast? Like, what are they?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
And how so you're like identifying a cancer cell basically? You're trying to cancer one of the cells.
I mean, you
So
want, right? Like, that's what HeLa cells are, right?
exactly. So is that like what you're
Those are the best growing cells are cancer cells.
so yeah, they're not I mean they obviously they don't put
So are you saying we're just going to be eating tumor steaks in our
I mean I
future? Is
guess
that,
is that I mean that seems to be the whole point of it. How else? I mean you're not going to have a hetero. Oh, is it heterotrophic then? If you're having different types of chicken cells all grow together, and kind of like what you're
yeah.
talking about, like before, like the hormone like, and the signaling and stuff like that. Like, what if you didn't have to add that to the media and you just grew them a diverse amount in there? I don't know. Finless. Here's Finless. So these guys are doing. Oh man, that looks good. I love the websites. That
The fish,
are.
dude, they're all the exact same website, the
It's
same like
yeah.
colors, same font, like
It's the greens. It's the reds. You
the
got to have a
green to
good red
the
there.
orange, the yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has to be red. You better have red meat if you're talking about red. But what's so funny is that a lot of these I mean, the fish that we eat, at least in the United States, I mean, it's injected with a lot of like the salmon, for instance, it's injected with food dye so that it makes it look like that. It doesn't normally look that color. It looks a lot more gray. So now we have genetically modified salmon to just create this artificial food coloring.
That's so funny.
It's so important to how we see this stuff.
Yeah, stuff like, I mean, and that's where, we haven't even talked about like the food science aspect of this, of things like taste, texture, color, smell. Like, do those attributes get carried over when you do something like a cell culture, or does that have to be added after the fact?
It's a great question, man. How do we taste? What is taste? Like, what is this stuff?
Right.
How can we hijack our brains into just thinking that we don't need this thing anyway? I mean, look at umami or whatever, right? For that taste, it's just added in MSG, baby.
Right.
Put it right in.
That's the thing. There's still going to be, it's still going to be like a processed food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really.
Oh, here's kind of like what I was talking about: plant-based tuna. Like, plants are the base of the product, and then the plants are cooked and stuff, and then they like taste like tuna. That would be a cool kind of like why. It seems like we're doing another step again, right? Even when you were talking about the algae making the carbohydrates, now then we're fermenting and breaking it down again, and then we're doing it. So it's like two already, and then a third for another fermentation to make the product that we want. It's interesting, right?
So is this company, are they doing like fermentation based cell culture? They are.
So
right?
This is this. They're doing two different.
Two products.
Yeah, exactly.
Two products, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's the scaffolding. That seems so hard, man. That seems to be the hardest thing for me. Like to wrap my head around how I can understand how you go from like, mammalian tissue culture, which is something that we see in the lab all the time. That's like not even that not hard to get my brain around it. But now scaffolding things together, that's tough, man. How do our cells how do they know where to go anyway and scaffold and make that 3D shape? It has to be hormone signaling, right?
That I think that's like the challenge is that like when it happens in the original organism, the scaffolding is provided by different cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have like a skeleton.
Exactly.
You have ligaments, right? You have cartilage. But in the fermentation tank, you're only growing one type of cell.
Mm-hmm.
You're not growing the whole organism. You're just picked like, I'm just going to grow the chicken breast cell. I'm not going to grow any of the tendons. I'm not going to grow the wings and the bones and like everything that like the skin that like gives it structure. You have to implement all that down the line in like crazy food science, techniques. And like, that's where like you're going to bring in a ton of other ingredients and products and like, gelatins and gums and like
you need
whatever.
Like a glue or something to kind of like.
You need something to like mush it together,
It has to have a bite. It has to, because you can't just. There is a big thing when we eat, like, going back to like how humans perceive food. Like, it has to. You can't chew milk. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you can't really chomp on it. It's like there's a definite texture there that is unique to, beef versus like a milk. And yeah, Blue Nalu's doing the same thing. Blue Nalu's trying to do the like fish again. Personally, man, I would love us to not stop messing with the oceans. So this is like a really cool thing for me, trying to figure out how we can. I don't know, just figure.
Yeah, it's like this is one of those spaces that is just like hyper funded right now, and there's just going to be so many startup companies. It's kind of like like internet companies, right? Because you don't know if who in this list has actual products. Like anybody who's showing you a product right now, they're going to show you like, here's our little slice of fish that we made. It only cost us $10 million.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So there's going to be eventually there's going to be like a Microsoft and an Apple and a Google that
Yeah.
come out of this.
That
Right?
90%
And
of them are
everybody,
failing. Yeah.
99% of them. Yeah, they're all gonna fail. But there's gonna be some big winners, and they're gonna be paradigm changing.
I mean, why not? Why isn't like the big meat producers right now? Why aren't they the ones that we're like looking up right now? I mean, it does like Tyson or something really not like have any.
I bet those guys have. I bet those guys have invested in some of these companies.
Let's see. Let's see. They're backing a Tyson and Kellogg are doing a mushroom-based ingredient startup. Working on
Tyson's invested in Memphis Meats. Memphis Meats is like one of the leading companies. They were one of the first, I think. It's just like oil companies. They're going to start investing in, they're going to start investing in renewable electricity companies and technologies. They're going to want to be, like ExxonMobil has their greenwashing algae division, so they can claim some stuff. I think Shell does a lot of stuff with like hydrogen fuel. Like
Upside Foods. Upside Foods. It was Memphis Meats. They rebranded. We were looking at them.
We were looking. Okay, yeah.
This is them. This is them. We were looking at this. So that makes sense. The chicken and stuff. Now they're that makes total sense.
It's Tyson. It's Tyson. So
yeah.
They don't want to get. They know, man. They know. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's the writings on the wall, and I mean, like people, I think are too. In general, I think. Look, man, like science isn't really well funded. I don't know what to tell people other than, sometimes you just got to go where the money is. And sometimes, it's a Berkeley startup. So I don't feel like their vision and their product is going to be soured by, being paid well, hopefully it makes it, better. And if it gets a better product at the end, then, maybe it's better for Tyson to change in the end anyway. So maybe we can like kind of embrace these companies.
Yeah, it'll be exactly, it'll be, it would be one thing if like Tyson, bought them out and then, locked away all their patents and shut the company down. Right.
Yeah, we're not doing fermentation foods anymore. Okay, then that's a good point. Good point.
They're actually like trying to push it forward, and who knows if what their motivation is? Are they doing it because they want that, to be the future, because they know that's the future, because they're just trying to look good? Who knows what their motivation is? But I mean, like, God, there's so much bad press about factory farmed chickens. It's awful.
So I feel like we've talked about meats and all that kind of stuff, but let's throw a bone to our love, algae. What can why this is Triton AI. So I wonder, like, I'm curious, like why can't we go to the primary producer? You know what I mean? It seems like we're going to the primary producers in ecology are the organisms that take food from the sun and make the plants out of it. They're making plants. And then the herbivore comes and then eats the plants. And then you have the carnivore that eats the herbivore, and then each of those stages is drastically inefficient because, especially when you go from the primary producer to the herbivore is trying to make muscles out of the plant material, and that's inherently inefficient. So you're talking about a lot of time and energy virtually wasted, on eating food that isn't as nutritious. But then obviously carnivores have to spend more energy in order to eat the herb, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but the point is like, I'm interested in this space just because I wonder if we could eat the primary producer and stop that energy loss from from each level.
Yeah, that's you touched on two things I'll comment on, but that's if you want like the most efficient path forward, you should eat something that came from the sun, right? If you want like the least loss of energy through trophic levels, go eat plants because they get all of their energy from the sun and then you get all your energy from them. So you're one step removed from the sun. Everything comes from the sun, right? If you're going to do, if you're going to eat animals, those animals had to eat plants. So now you're two steps away, right?
Exactly.
And for some animals, you're three steps away because those animals are carnivores, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out there eating something that eats animals like fish, right? Most fish are carnivores.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of fish eat smaller fish who eat smaller fish who eat smaller plants. So you might be 3 or 4 levels, trophic levels away. So you lose out on that efficiency. So yeah, if you can just be eating something that like got its energy from the sun, that's the best thing forward. And that's where like there's not there's not a lot of like high protein plants. Most plants are like cellulose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most plants are fibrous cellulose. They might make a seed, like a soybean or something, makes a seed that has the protein component in it, right? So
Yeah.
you've got you have to build this whole plant structure. You got to build roots. You got to build leaves. You got to build pods and flowers, and then you finally get the bean at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So if you're growing microalgae in the sunlight, you don't have any of those things. All you have is like this little ball of protein and sugar and vitamins,
Mm-hmm.
and every single cell is the same in your culture, and you can harvest it and you eat the whole thing. Like we don't eat 100% of what's growing in the field. We eat, maybe like 5% of what's growing in the field. The rest of it is just waste. The rest of it is all that plant matter that just comes along with growing plants. But with microorganisms, since they don't have those structures, you eat 100% of what you grow, and that's what makes it so much more efficient. Again,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why, like same thing with like the cell culture. Even though it's in fermentation tank, there's no like skin, there's no bones, there's no organs.
Yeah.
You're not wasting any of that stuff, and all that stuff took energy to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
you're getting so much more out of it. So yeah, back to your point about like, can we just eat primary producers? Like, yeah, go eat plants. And algae is like a cool new, not even that new, but like I think it's kind of finally like coming into the mainstream a little bit more.
Yeah.
All these other food technologies of it's a good high protein alternative. So it kind of like checks a lot of boxes. These guys at Triton, they do it in fermentation, so they're still like that. In that classification with fermentation being like one step, I guess 2 steps away from the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to grow plants to grow sugar, and then you can feed the sugar into their fermentation vessels. But you could also grow algae directly in ponds photosynthetically. That's how they make like aquaculture feeds for like shrimp and bivalves and like farmed fish and stuff. They have big algae ponds that are near those farms, and then they can feed the algae directly to those guys, and you get like everything's produced right there on site. The other thing that you mentioned that I was going to touch on is just because we've been talking about like mammalian culture, we've been talking about cell-based cultures,
Mm-hmm.
Cell-based meat cultures, right? But there's like in the same arena of fermentation and producing like protein products, there's like all the other microbes. There's like tons and tons and tons of types of fungi and algae and not really bacteria. Really, it's just like fungi and algae. But you could just grow those in fermentation tanks already really
Mm-hmm.
well, and you can make like protein products out of it. You don't need to
Yeah.
worry about all the issues. So the other company that I've really liked recently is Meaty, um, and I think they do something similar to I think it was corn. I forget, but there's like you know there yeah here you got their Meaty website up, right? Like these guys are making
That looks delicious.
they're dude they're growing so that's like that's fungus. They're just growing fungus. They're growing like the mycelium, which is essentially like the roots of a mushroom.
Yeah.
And the final product is like 90% that. It's like 90% mycelium of what they grew. And there's tons of companies doing this because like yeast and fungi are super productive. They're really easy to grow in fermentation tanks or something similar. They're high in protein, and like you get the cool thing is a lot of them are filamentous, so you get that structure without having the scaffolding issues
Yes,
that
dude.
the cell-based cultures have. You just get it comes out as like already structured because it's a filament versus like a single rounded cell. Um,
Man, I feel this
so
like my wife introduced this to me with portobello mushrooms, like using those as
yeah,
the patty, and like you bite into it and you're like, dang, this has some like exactly what we were talking about.
right,
It has some response,
texture
when
and
you
like
like
right.
push down on it, you're like, okay, this is I'm chewing on something. I feel like I'm actually
Uh,
like eating something.
yeah, so I honestly like I'm if I was to be bullish, so we've talked about kind of like I guess like two or three different like paths forward here. I think I'm the most bullish on the mushroom steaks,
Mm-hmm.
the fungal produced stuff because the fermentation industry is most like the history of fermentation comes from the history of yeast and fungi, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
like since the dawn of time, man has been growing yeast and fungi for foods
It's
via
true.
fermentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and like the microbial diversity is insane. And there's like cool, like look, they got pictures of
That's
their hyphae and
beautiful. Look at
everything,
that.
you know?
That
Yeah,
looks
and that's
so
like so
cool.
this dude, that doesn't that look like a piece of flesh, just like
Mm-hmm.
bleached, like the tendons and like the cell structure. So
Yeah, that's a really good
I
point.
think I think it seems like to me that's like the path of least resistance, um, but it still comes down to like a culinary question at the end of the day. Is like, is it any good? Does it taste like a steak? Or is the only thing that's ever going to taste like steak mammalian cells, and you need to either make cows or make mammalian cultures, and like
Mm-hmm.
there seems like there's just like so many hurdles that come with that mammalian culture. Um, so it's like instead of trying to like replace cows with cell culture, why don't we just replace cows with mushrooms and just like grow
Mm-hmm.
tons of tons of mycelium steaks and look at that guy, look at like cutting it, like I don't know,
Oh
man.
man,
I
it's
think
for real. Like
yeah, like it's got
it's
like
not like
density,
tofu.
it's got structure to it, dude.
Yeah,
No,
it's like
no,
tofu. You're going
they've
right
got
through it.
it's like tofu, dude. It's like tofu, except it's grown in a fermentation tank.
That's crazy. I wonder how they're. So then that means that they're not doing the scaffolding. Like it's the scaffolding's
No,
already done.
it's already done. It's literally. I think it's just like a
Mm,
compression step. I'm not certain. They
dang.
just got their news article here. They just got a $150 million C series.
I mean, this looks amazing. I'm surprised whenever I like try the plant based meat stuff it's honestly incredible how much it's taken off with like Beyond Meat and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I honestly don't know if people could tell. I really don't know. I don't think so. If I was betting money, I don't think that they could. I think people would say that they could, but I don't think that you could on some of the stuff. Like I think that so there is some off taste with like the vegan
It's like
cheese.
impossible.
That's like
We haven't even talked about. we haven't even talked about Impossible Burger.
Oh
right?
yeah, we
They're
should
kind of
bring
like
up Impossible Burgers, of course.
they're like, I mean, I'm gonna call them the OG of this industry because they're the ones that really had the first, I think, like most important technological innovation, which was making hemoglobin, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they took a gene for making hemoglobin out of soybeans and they put it into fungi. They put it into yeast, right? And they're growing fungi,
Mm,
right?
interesting.
Um, and then they purify it. They purify out the hemoglobin and then they put it into whatever, like a soy or pea patty, and then they make their thing.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that.
Beyond Burger, yeah, dude. Oh, yeah. So it's really funny. The guy that started this company, Pat Brown, he was a professor at, I think, Stanford. And his original idea was he wanted to utilize the waste from soybean plants because if you were to like take a soybean plant out of the ground, the roots of it are like red with hemoglobin, right? So he's like, we're already growing all this hemoglobin in the roots of soy plants. Why don't we just extract all that heme out of the roots of this agricultural waste, and then we'll put that into these patties? That was his original idea,
Hmm.
and it's a great idea. Except like the logistics of it were impossible. Like to get like, like
No pun intended. No pun intended.
to get all of that like agricultural waste into one spot, to actually do the extraction and the
Mm-hmm.
processing of it, like it didn't work. So they were just like, okay, what's the next thing we could do? Let's just take the gene from the soybean plant and let's put it into, I forget what yeast they use. I don't know if they use Saccharomyces or not. But let's just put it into a strain of yeast that we know we can grow in fermentation tanks
Mm-hmm.
super easily because that's been figured out forever, right? And then they just grow those up, and then they just break the cell open and take out the protein that they're interested in, that red protein, and then they add that into their product, and it's their blood. That's why it's red.
Wow, that's interesting. That's so cool. I mean, I think what we're talking about, like with lab grown meats and stuff, is making it so that to the end user, it they don't know or care. Where it
Right,
is. It's just as cheap. It's just as good. I mean, like
right.
the McDonald's burger is like what 20% ground beef anyway. You're not going to be able to tell the difference. And like
It's
I
just, yeah,
think
it's
I
all
think
sawdust.
yeah. But the point is, and I love this: eat meat, save the planet. You know, I'm convinced the path forward is the path forward of least resistance on climate change, and showing people that like you don't need to dramatically change like your life. You don't have to like completely and I think those conversations get down into really deep doomer nihilistic. We have to completely restructure society. We have to completely rethink of how we make food. And maybe we do, like at the governmental level, at the national scale. Like that makes sense. Maybe we need to, incentivize these things versus, farming, or maybe we can create tax incentives and that kind of stuff in order to give more money to these companies. But we don't have to fundamentally change like how we eat, and you talk to climate change skeptics or people that are digging their heels in really. And it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
not going to eat insects for the rest of my life. So, deal with it. I'm going to eat beef. And it's like,
right,
well, that's
right.
a false dichotomy logical fallacy, right? We're not choosing between those two. Like there's a way that
Well,
you don't know any different.
I mean, it's going to come down to economics, like everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just going to become it's meat is going to become so expensive, right? Like climate change is going to cause a massive disruption to our food chain,
Yeah.
and like you can eat as much meat as you want. If you're just going to go broke doing it, it's not meat is not going to get cheaper. It's only going to get more expensive. You know, there's no way to make it cheaper anymore, right? We've done everything we possibly can to make cheap meat, and like we did a great job at it, and it's everywhere now. And there's a price that comes with that kind of production. And I'm like, I'm not going to blame cows for climate change, because there's not one single thing you can ever blame for climate change besides just like humans existing and doing our thing,
Yeah.
right? But like, it's going to just be economics. It's going to, meat's going to be $20 a pound. It's not going to be $5 a pound. Like, and that's why it's really cool to see, places like McDonald's and Burger King doing these product launches with these alt meat companies, right? Burger King has the Impossible Burger, and I think McDonald's did Beyond Meat. I think like KFC did like a Beyond Chicken, because it's coming down like to the point where those products are going to cost just as much as meat. And at that point, like that's why like the long term efficiency is the thing that really matters. Because if in a fermentation tank, you can always get the same quality product every single time, and the inputs you need are coming from things like plants, right? They're coming from, you just need sugar. You need sugar, you need a couple other resources, and you're going to be able to make the same product every single day of the week, right? And you're going to be able to make it for the same price. That's consistency that large corporations look for. And that's like, the fluctuations that come in with traditional agriculture, especially when climate change gets worse, or like I don't know, like wars or droughts or like any of these other things that can happen that affect something outside of a fermentation tank, it's going to affect the price. And then there's going to be price fluctuations, and stuff's just going to either get expensive or it can become unavailable, because you're trying to control something that's, at such like like large logistical scale. It becomes really challenging, versus all you have to do is just control a fermentation tank,
Yeah, exactly.
Keep running that. Put a couple of things in, get exactly what you want out every single day. It's efficient. It makes sense. So like, regardless of whether it's going to be, the Beyond Burger or fungi or algae or animal cells or fish cells, like, the future of food is going towards fermentation. It's going away from traditional agriculture. Traditional agriculture is just going to become a feedstock, a resource for putting into these fermenters, right?
Yeah. My kids like this more. We have the plant-based chicken nuggets that aren't, real chicken, and they like them more than chicken. McDonald's chicken McNuggets, dude. They honestly, we've got them like 10. They hate them. I don't know what it is. They will not eat a chicken McNugget. But then like you have given them this Beyond thing that we get, and they love them. So it's I don't know. It's like a generational thing too. Once we kind of like, people have been so, once we tell them like, oh yeah, we told you that they were chicken nuggets, but they weren't this entire time. Right. They'll be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've found some. I'm blanking on the brand name, but I found some really good, because my mom is a vegan, so whenever she comes to visit, we always like load up on like vegan stuff, and I'll just buy like, there's always like that plant-based meat section, at the grocery store now, which is great to see.
That's crazy that they have one. Section. That's amazing.
They have their own section. That's the thing, man. Like,
it's so cool.
So, and I feel like every time I go there's like a new brand that I've never seen before. And I'll always like try this one or that one. And I've had some that are delicious, man. They're great. People like, you get a good chef involved with like your product, and you get some good food scientists. Like, that's the thing. At the end of the day, you just need blobs of protein that like look and act like what you're trying to mimic, and you can make it taste good.
Totally agreed, man. I think you hit on like some great points, and I totally agree with you that the future for a lot of things, a lot of fields is microbiology, man. From our like the materials that we make, the food we eat, the fuel that goes to our cars and our airplanes and stuff. It's all microbiology. We try to, we think of ourselves as these really. Humans are on top of this artificial stair of evolution and It's the opposite. We're figuring out ways to control these microbes in new and different ways, and it's only getting better. Like the control and the automation and the AI assisted, plant-based meats, my fermentation process is only going to get better. It's not going away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, dude, what do you think? What would be the elevator pitch if you had to tell someone about fermentation and the future of food? What do you think the big thing that you've learned?
I mean, I think I kind of just said it there, but if I were just to reiterate one thing, it would just be, I guess two things would be control and efficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to have absolute domain over what's going on inside that reactor. So you have consistent product quality. This technology is not new by any means. The stuff that's new is the biology. Try to put new organisms that you think are going to produce a familiar product, but like the underlying technology of fermentation is not new. It's really well established, really well understood, really, really scalable, really controllable, and it's really efficient because, again, you're making, like, you want to make protein, so just make protein. Why are you making a skeleton? Why are you making roots?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to make all those supporting structure. You can just make what you want directly, right? So you get to make things really efficiently, and there's like virtually no waste that comes out of a fermentation tank. There's nothing that goes to waste. It all gets used up. They put out carbon dioxide. It's going to be
trapped.
That's always a case. Yeah. So clearly they're putting out too much carbon dioxide for the fish cultures or whatever. But it's just, highly efficient and highly controllable, very reliable. And in a world that seems to be more and more unpredictable in terms of climate and resource scarcity, these are the sort of things that we need to base our food infrastructure on, because we want to stay around, right? We don't want we don't want to go hungry, right? We don't want to just be like eating dandelions all day because all of our animals are dead, right? So this is I really feel confidently this is where the future of food is going to be going to. I think a lot quicker than more people anticipate. The next 10 or 20 years, we're going to see some really big changes to what's on our dinner plate.
In a good way, I think. It's like a lot less.
In a good way, man.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot less processed too. In a way, it's like fermented food, but it's like it's getting away. It's more pure rather than processed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like, I might disagree with that because it also depends on like what is what's being done to it, like after you take it out of it, like
the scaffolding and stuff.
You could still add a ton. You could still like dump a ton of salt on it.
Yeah.
And you could still like put a bunch of like preservatives into it or something, which probably will happen.
Yeah.
So that part, I think I would disagree. I think it's going to be still heavily processed. But I don't know if we're going to have an alternative, if you don't want to just like eat like protein soup, if you want something that looks like a chicken nugget, it's got to go through some sort of processing.
There you go. Just drink Soylent shakes all day. That's it.
It all goes back to like Soylent Green. Right?
If you guys would just drink protein shakes, we wouldn't have to do all this stuff.
Everybody just walks around just slurping their like tuna algae fungal cell shakes. We'd be fine.
I know. Now we have to create entirely new fields of science in order to feed you people. Jeez. All right, man.
Yeah. What are you? I'll throw it right back at you. You're the host here. So what's your take on it? Closing thoughts there.
I think that I think that we are at a great starting point right now in terms of the ability to make these new generation of foods, and it's only going to get better with the latest engineering and the latest technologies. And we're going to see an increase in the number of foods. We're going to see a decrease in the cost. We're going to see an increase in quality. It's just going to impact a lot more of our lives. And kind of like what you were talking about at the beginning, it's going to be the clothes we make. It's going to be the fuel that we use. It's going to be so much of our life that's going to be impacted by this stuff. It's not going to be just food. Food is an intricate way that all of us kind of have to share in this process of where our food comes from, and we have to eat every day, obviously. But it's a new. I think it's a really exciting interdisciplinary part of like microbiology, which obviously I'm really interested in, and engineering, and yeah, man, I'm really excited. Honestly, I'm really, really excited for the future. It's one of the parts of science and engineering that gives me a lot of hope, because a lot of people they just know about the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meats, and they don't really understand what's going on. And especially like learning about those new type of fermenters at these crazy large scales and how much money that they're saving. It's just, I can't see it not being invested in, like, even more so when they get to that part. I think that as they go lower and lower, more money is going to go into it, just inevitably. And yeah, it's just going to be it's exciting. I think it's cool, and it's exciting. And like I said, I think it's going down the line of, how humans are impacting the environment negatively, and we're impacting it negatively in a lot of ways. It's a lot of figuring out ways to make it so that the end user isn't impacted, that they're not like having to drastically change a lot of the stuff, because they like their burger, they like to grill, they like to do that stuff. That's a culture. That's a learned thing. That's you can't just say like you're just eating cockroach protein meal now. It's like not going to be the future. People are going to reject it. Even if they did that, people aren't going to do it. I would love for people to take it seriously and try to change things. Don't buy palm oil, like, for example. Just don't do it. I liked your example. There's no reason to. There's certain things that we can cut out entirely, but eating meat, I don't feel like it's. I love the idea, basically, of people not having to be vegan shamed in order to impact the world.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's going that way quickly.
Yeah, and I've impacted my own behavior. We eat meat a lot less, and when we do eat meat, it'll be like the more expensive stuff anyway. Just trying to figure out like what we can do. So I'll probably be the first in line to buy this kind of stuff. So.